Chapter 23. Arlene. I shouted. I grabbed the monster with my hands and literally pulled it off her before it could position itself to take a second and certainly lethal bite. It stumbled clumsily. I grabbed the AB-10 and pumped 24 rounds into its open, blood-caked maw. It didn't get up. I was almost afraid to touch her. Blood pumped out of the horrible, fatal wound. Arlene was dying. Her face was sallow, eyes vacant and staring. One pupil was dilated, the other contracted to a pinpoint. There was nothing I could do, not even with a full medical lab. But damn her, she was not going to die here and join that river of faces. As gently as I could, I lifted Arlene's bleeding body in my arms and carried her out of that circle of hell. Her rasping breath was a call to arms, a signal that life and hope still remained in the young gal. I set her down at the end of the corridor. The lift door was blocked by a river of what appeared to be lava. Hoping the red stuff was at least no worse than the green stuff, I dashed across into an alcove where a single switch mocked me. I flipped it, causing a path to rise up through the lava. So far, so good. I ran back, grabbed Arlene, and walked across the path as quickly as possible. At the last step before reaching the lift, I heard a grinding noise from behind. I paused and looked back. A new path rose slowly, leading to an alcove hidden from view except from where I now stood. The cubbyhole contained another one of the blue face spheres that I thought I'd never see again, the one item that I had hesitated to tell Arlene about because it seemed so incredible. The sight was like another of the adrenaline bursts. Quickly, before the path could lower again, I powered her across, not bothering to stop and pick up pieces of equipment that fell from us, some landing on the path, some lost in the lava. I had a great terror that the sphere would fly away just before I got there, like a carnival balloon just out of reach. I reached it, hesitated for a moment, then literally threw Arlene onto the sphere to make sure I wouldn't be the one to touch it first. With a nearly audible silent pop, the blue liquid was all over her, and the red liquid on her body, the blood, evaporated into the blue. Arlene sat up and coughed, looking like someone coming out of a deep sleep. How do you feel? My shoulder hurts like a son of a bitch. What the hell happened? Pinky decided to have you for a midnight snack. I put him on a diet. You sure you're all right? Standing up, she shook her arm, staring in wonder at the shredded sleeve and tooth marks. What in God's name did you do to me? Quote, I figured the time had finally come to tell her about the magical blue spheres. She had no trouble believing me. Only my pistol and some shotgun shells had been lost to the lava. Weapons in hand, we slid into the elevator and pressed the only floor button, labeled Command Center. The lift had barely begun to grind slowly downward when suddenly Arlene reached past me and pushed the red kill button. The elevator stopped, falling silent. Why did you kill the power? She stared at me before answering. For a moment I had a terrible fear that something had gone wrong with the blue sphere and she was going to turn into a zombie in front of me. Instead she asked, Fly, are you starving, or is it just me? I shook my head. She continued, maybe it's that blue thing, but I'm so famished I could swallow one of those pink demons. How about floating pumpkin pie for dessert? Quote, and I'm suddenly exhausted. Fly, I need some sleep. I had completely lost track of the supplies. Arlene hadn't. Don't you ever listen to training videos? Never wander into battle without MREs. She demonstrated the truth of her maxim. Suddenly, I realized I was hungrier than I thought. The meal ready to eat sounded like the finest gourmet cuisine in the solar system. A stopped elevator is a secure base. I never would have thought of it. Next best thing to a holiday, and she added, raising an eyebrow. Arlene showed a domestic side that surprised me. While we talked, she took the packages of freeze-dried food and mixed them in the water of her canteen. Sorry it'll be cold, she said as I watched her shake the contents with the skill of a bartender preparing the perfect martini. That's all right, beautiful. I like cold. I picked up the package, glanced at the title, Cold Beef Stew. I also liked the fact that Arlene was alive. As we chowed down, I felt the strongest emotions since finding her on Dimos. Maybe she sensed the inappropriate feelings coming off me in waves. She lowered her head and blinked rapidly, as if stopping herself from crying by main force. What's wrong? I asked. Don't want to tell you. Why not? She hesitated. Willie, she said. PFC Dodd. Oh, I squirmed uncomfortably. I've been forcing myself not to think about him. He's dead, isn't he? Or, worse, you don't know that. I thought you were dead or reworked, but I found you alive. Find anybody else. I didn't say anything. Fly, I've accepted the fact that he's dead. I mean, I don't think I could face the other possibility. She looked up, her eyes moist but not tearing. Promise me something. Anything possible. If we find him and he is, you know, and if I can't do it, will you? Promise. And don't mention him again. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Funny lump in my throat. Yeah, babe. I'll be happy to blow away my rival for your hand if he should happen to turn up. A zombie. No problemo. She changed the subject, wrenching my mind back on the primary issue. Fly, I think it's pretty likely that the aliens we're fighting aren't the same ones who built the gates. I was wondering about that myself, I said. All this weird stuff, skulls and satanic symbols, there was nothing about the gates themselves that hinted at this. The gates don't look like a Vincent Price movie. There's nothing eldritch about the gates, she said. I was starting to like that word. So let's assume these aliens found the gates and discovered a way to turn them on from the other end. But why do they look so much like human style? Demons. Genetic engineering, I suggested. They could be deliberately designed to look like our conception of hell, particularly the hell princes. They're the dead. Giveaways. Can't you find some other word than dead? She begged, a fleck of red tomato paste on her lips. The hell princes are just too much like medieval drawings of the devil to be natural, unless they really are hell princes, Arlene said. Exclamation mark. Shook my head, unwilling to consider that possibility. So we sat in silence for a moment, finishing our food and drink. Much more thinking along these lines and I'd be ready to take communion again. I was never really afraid of monsters as a child, Arlene finally said. Grown-ups were scary enough by themselves. Why invade at all? What is this for? Quote, good question, she said. Here's another, if they can genetically engineer imps and demons, why do they need human zombie slaves? And why grow human flesh? Quote, maybe they want super zombies, more powerful than these dead excuses for lemmings, but still able to pass among us undetected. Arlene yawned, struggling to show enthusiasm. But that may be their weakness, Fly. The zombies don't amount to much. You and I aren't scared by skulls and evil symbols. What if there is a finite number of the actual monsters, and they can't easily recreate them? What if the monsters too are reworked from other creatures the mastermind has to breed and raise? That would mean every horrible creature we kill is one fewer to invade Earth if they can't be replaced. Until the new, improved pod people come online. I liked it, Arlene. If you're right, all we have to do is kill everything, and we end the invasion. We didn't have anything for dessert, so we used imagination to sweeten the conversation. I've been thinking about the idea they're using Deimos as a spaceship, I said. How can you move something as large as a whole moon? I was thinking some sort of hyperspace tunnel. Yeah, I know, I've been reading too much sci-fi, Fly. I didn't say it. At least it was something, a hypothesis. Maybe there's some way to break through the tunnel walls. I asked. Maybe, but it could also kill us. We don't know if outside the walls has the same physical laws, and even if it does, if there's even any air, it could also disrupt what's happening, maybe destroy Deimos and everything on it, including us. But that would throw a monkey wrench in their invasion plans, she said with a smile that turned into a yawn. She wasn't bored. Her eyelids were heavy from exhaustion. If these creatures run the moon, the ship, I said, then what horrors guard the tunnel wall? Those faces couldn't be real, could they? I hated those faces. Her head nodded forward and she snored. It wasn't a very loud snore. The elevator was as secure a place as we were likely to find. I sat watch and let her sleep. There was an eerie silence despite the faint vibration. After 4 hours I woke her up. Your turn, she insisted, rubbing pieces of sleep from her eyes. Don't let me sleep more than 3 hours. Fly, sleep. I command you to sleep, she said, making hypnotic passes. I slept, not because of the mystic passes, but because of a mud slogger's ability to sleep anywhere. I could have done without the dreams. The river of faces touched something deep in both of us, the place where you store up all your fears and regrets. Going to sleep meant sinking right into that place. I was tangled in long, sticky fibers like a giant spider web, but at the center of the web was a face made of 100 different faces. I didn't want to look at it. But the face came closer, slowly rotating like a planet, showing different faces. Spread across its surface, smiles melting into frowns, rows of eyes like so many beads of glass, noses creating an uneven mountain range stretching to the horizon. Then the sphere of blue faces was pressed right against mine, and it had stopped turning. In the center was the face of my long-dead grandfather as I had seen him in the open casket. His toothless mouth was working, lips twisting, but no sounds came out. I knew what he was saying, though, dinna let them rework me, Fianna. Flynn, me lad, dinna never let them rework us all, begad. The sticky fibers became tendrils sliding up my nose and into my mouth, choking me. The truth is out there. I woke up in a cold sweat. Arlene was shaking me hard. Fly, are you okay? Sleep is overrated, I gasped. I was just as tired as when I'd put my head down. Standing, I felt dizzy. Probably running a fever, but I didn't want to mention it. There was nothing to be done anyway. I pushed the button back into reactivate the power, then I pushed the floor button, and the elevator continued its trip to the command center. It was a good thing we'd eaten and tried to get some rest. The moment the doors opened, we were in another damned firefight with zombies, imps, pumpkins, and a specter. The ambush trapped us in the lift. We used the lift doors for cover. By the time we worked our way out, we'd cleaned a huge room with stairways at either end, leading up to a split level. There were 6 pillars, each had its designated nasty hiding behind it. Pushing through a door at the top of the split level, we found a gigantic indoor garden or arboretum. The air was thick with pollen from a jungle of fleshy plants, overgrowing where some breed of computers used to be. Arlene sneezed repeatedly. I lucked out. I was so exhausted that maybe I wasn't breathing as deeply. You can say one thing for the greenhouse, I observed. Plants are plants here, and not combined with machines. Quote, blowing her nose, allergies, Arlene added, and men are men, and so are the women. All that was missing was a handsome horse and blazing 6 guns. The absence of monsters was reason enough to explore. We could breathe. Later, the primary motif seemed to be a blackish, oily wood that sure as hell never originated on the old home planet. Periodically, the wood bubbled and popped like ulcerated sores in whatever monstrous trees had produced it. I imagined a 3-headed Paul Bunyan with axe-handle hands cutting the planks. The ground squished underfoot as we walked. I looked closely and saw incredibly long, wafer-thin insects scooting out from under our feet. We finally reached the end of the arboretum and the vegetation ran out against puke green marble, just as we'd seen back in the warehouse. Will you look at that? Said Arlene, pointing at red-orange curtains of fire, crackling beyond the high walls, at a sufficient distance that we weren't roasting. Now that's bad taste, I said. Next they'll have Lieutenant Weems in a red devil suit pop out of a cake, complete with pointy tail. She asked wryly, you have a twisted mind, PFC Sanders. Quote, the better to explore with, I added mentally. I hope this situation wasn't like those science fiction stories where the terrifying menaces are taken telepathically from the greatest fears of the human beings involved. My worst fears couldn't be this corny. Arlene found a switch that opened a hidden room. We went with the flow. Entering the chamber, we marveled at how different it was from what we'd seen before. The entire room was constructed of that black, oily, ulcerating wood. There was one object in the room, placed at dead center, a bas-relief of a demonic monster more horrible, or more ridiculous, than any we'd fought. Every physical attribute of the thing was exaggerated so that it almost seemed to be a cartoon. The largest protuberance of all was its penis, sticking out at a 45-degree angle. They've got to be kidding, said Arlene. I hate to bring it up, but that's probably another switch, I suggested. I've handled worse, she admitted.